also did evil to black. Hello, everybody. It's George from Ireland, so welcome back to my channel. Anyway, so this is about the Ukrainian counteroffensive, which appears to be finally gathering steam. It's been going on for almost 3 months now. And in the United States, their military commentators have said they're actually making some serious progress. I mean, it's slow progress because is it like 17 miles at the deepest point of penetration? And they need to go about another 95 miles to get to the Sea of Azov at the nearest point. Need to get there and hold it and not be then pushed out by the Russians in Ukraine's unstated objective to break the land corridor between Russia and the illegally occupied Crimean Peninsula, to put the whole of Crimea under threat. Remember, Russia seized that illegally in 2014. They held a referendum. Then they claimed that they'd integrated it into the Russian Federation. Crimea, which was illegally part of Ukraine, as still legally is Ukrainian possession and is recognized as Ukrainian sovereign territory by almost every country in the world. Was recognized by Russia until 2014, and hilariously, the Russian embassy in South Africa, they just published a map showing Crimea as part of Ukraine, and then they took it down straight away. And I was working in a school in Moscow a few years ago, and even they had a map which showed Crimea as part of Ukraine, and they then colored it in, a map issued by the Russian Ministry of Education. Anyway. They colored it in to pretend it was part of Russia. But another thing about that, there was a treaty in 2003 demarcating the border between Ukraine and Russia, recognizing Crimea as part of Ukraine, and Putin himself signed that treaty, and it would be a crime to put your signature to such a document in Russia today. So trying to get back, but that's what they'll really fight for. The other illegally occupied regions that Russia holds, doesn't hold the entirety of any of them, holds bits of them, a little bit of Kherson, about half of Zaporizhia, a little bit less than half of Donetsk and Lugansk, might be willing to have some sort of liminality, agree to disagree, so compromise, partition in the other four, but not Crimea. But anyway, so John Kirby, who's the White House main spokesman, said that they've actually made some serious headway. They're learning how to get through these Russian minefields, but they just don't have enough equipment. Apparently, the cluster munitions, a lot of it's actually just about blowing up a path that that for about 200 meters deep and maybe 30 meters wide, you've blown up all the munitions, you can safely go through and have to do it again. But that's slow. You come under artillery fire, but the Ukrainians are taking out Russian artillery far faster than the Ukrainians are taking them out. But, the actual casualty figures, the imbalance is not very big. The US, they privately estimate 120,000 Russians killed versus 70,000 Ukrainians. So that's almost 2 to 1. But remember, Russia outnumbers Ukraine 3.5 to 1. The Ukrainians are going to run out of soldiers a lot sooner. And bear in mind, the Russians can sometimes get Tajik people or Kyrgyz people, migrant workers, to enlist in the Russian army and just use them as cannon fodder instead. The Russian soldier, on the whole, is of a lower caliber than the Ukrainians. Not saying Ukrainians are superior, but Russia's obviously getting some of these prison recruits, people with no military experience. In fairness, Ukraine also released people from prison early in the war to join the military. But Russia seems to provide them with a really inferior training, rush them through training, a week's training, and something like that. Often they've done their compulsory military service, a year of it around the age of 18, and brought back 10 or 20 years later, supposed to have a proper month of a refresher course, and they haven't been. Technology's moved on, doctrine's moved on in the 20 years since somebody's left the army in some cases. This is a rather different fight from the fairly sort of static fight from Grozny in the late 90s when they were fighting in Chechnya. Anyway, so the United States acknowledges this counteroffensive has been slower than they hoped or they wanted. There had been an attempt to damp down expectations about it, but there are some formidable defenses the Russians have constructed, like the Dragon's Teeth, as well as the anti-tank concrete barriers and so on. Ukraine just doesn't have enough of the demining equipment. They need more tanks, and they got these Leopard tanks. They're often really old-fashioned. They get the old-fashioned ones from the 1970s, but nevertheless, they're almost indestructible. Only 5 of them have been destroyed out of a couple of hundred. When I say destroyed, we say, well, maybe badly damaged, but that's not destroyed. Sometimes irreparable. Sometimes they'll fire, but they can't move, or vice versa. They can be used somewhat. And apparently, none of the crew have been killed. Not one. Some of them have been wounded. So these Western-made tanks really put the emphasis on protecting the crew, whereas the Russians ones don't. Because remember, to train a tank crewman takes months, so I'm told. By the way, I'm a complete civilian. I'm sure it shows. So better, well, the Ukrainians are doing better because the equipment and the training is finally taking effect. But it's been estimated by some, oh, the Russians have fired over 10 million shells over the past year. They can only produce 1 million shells a year. Their stocks are down. That's why their fire is slackening. They are hardly ever firing the missiles because they're running low on missiles and they can't replace them very quickly. They can't get so many Western components. The Western components they can get, often crucial for guidance systems or whatever, they have to get these via third countries. And because of the threat of secondary sanctions, the third countries are reluctant to sell them on. They're becoming more expensive. Even if you can get the component, it's going to take longer. It's going to take weeks, months before you get it. So they have to husband these in case they really need them. And we know they're spooked because that's why Russia's against talking about its nuclear missiles. They're Shetan nuclear missiles, claiming they could it could get to London in 6 minutes. Now, I'm told that's a lie. I'm told the UK would have a warning of 10 minutes. It'd been fired a bit before that, so therefore the flying time was like 11 minutes, 12 minutes, something like that. Notice it's been launched. Okay, launch countermeasures now to have any chance of shooting it down. So thankfully, I don't live in London. A little bit scary. The beginning of the war, I was a little bit worried. Could they really launch a nuke? Almost a year ago, that October, Putin was talking about them. I was a bit worried, but his red line has been crossed across many, many times. And because he claims that Ukraine is attacking Crimea, which he says is an integral part of the Russian Federation, and there be no use of weapons of mass destruction. I think if Ukrainian soldiers landed in significant numbers in Crimea, that might change. It might be a tactical nuke against Ukraine. But you can tell how worried they are, the Russian high command, which is why they're saying, well, we might going to have to use nukes to win this, or use them against NATO. NATO is really helping them. NATO really is our enemy, and so on. So NATO people are going to be going to be wary of loose talk and not saying anything which would validate that false allegation. Fascinating, what a Ukrainian government spokesman said that there were Russian citizens inside Russia who are firing these drones at Russia. And there was another very effective day of drone attacks late last night, early this morning. Now, that might be a lie. Maybe they're Ukrainian soldiers. I don't know. Why would you say this if it weren't true, if you're the Ukrainian government? Possibly you don't want the Russians to realize what range they have. It could be they're trying to get the Russians to waste their time going on a wild goose chase, trying to find these Russian dissidents who are firing drones inside Russia at Russian military targets, and just use up their manpower searching for these phantoms. So those are two possible reasons. Anyway, apparently they're very cheap cardboard drones. Obviously, the bombs of them are whatnot. The warheads are not cardboard, but the rest is, and very light. So, and can't be detected. Well, the metal can't be detected. There are other ways to detect them. Obviously, bring them down. And an effective drone attack on several Russian regions again, closing Vnukovo and Domodedovo airports in Moscow again for about an hour in the wee hours of this morning. And remember, 1st of September was traditional day for the school term to start in Russia, and Zondas had to go back to school even though it happened to be a Saturday or Sunday. Well, today's a Friday. Some schools say come in today, even though we won't probably start till Monday. So a lot of Russian families have been coming back from their summer holidays, flights diverted. What a pain in the neck for them to realize, no, this war is having an effect. Invading Ukraine is not cost-free. You will pay a price. If you make them suffer, that you will suffer, and so on, that you're not safe. This war to make you safe has made you less safe. So end it now. Ukraine never did this sort of thing before, but it's going to get worse and worse. So the Ukrainian drones are going to having a longer range and becoming more accurate. But that the Russians are learning things and they're defending better, but they don't have many reserves, which are they're putting these elite paratroop units into trenches. Let's talk about calling up the young army people below the age of 18 doing quasi-military training in school. And Putin, oh, I'm so fond of kids, although he's very happy to deliberately kill kids in Ukraine in huge numbers and has kidnapped tens of thousands of them. That's why he's been arraigned as a war criminal for that by the International Criminal Court. He might start sending people in underage and say, no, lies, Western propaganda. Probably not huge numbers and not enormously underage, just 1 year underage to the battlefront. We shall see. But although things have got a little bit better for Ukraine, I think they're still a long way from reaching the Sea of Azov. I don't think they'll do it myself. they could have a breakthrough, suddenly go a lot faster than we anticipated, could be pushed back. Doesn't appear that the Russians are massing or have the ability to do that, have the numbers, have the logistics, and so on. People talk about this collapse in Russian morale. I don't see their morale collapsing. They're not surrendering in droves. There's not significant desertion. So there's still a lot more fight left in them. Will it be going in 5 years? Fascinating question. I mean, possibly. I couldn't rule it out. I'll be saying it'll be going a year from now, almost certainly. Because one of his next real target date is, can he delay it beyond 20th of January 2025 if Trump is coming back? If on the first Tuesday of November it's clear that Biden is being returned, or maybe Kamala Harris in his place, or a Republican who's still committed to Ukrainian freedom, then that would be a real blow to Putin's morale and have to have a complete rethink. So we mustn't give Putin what he wants. We mustn't put his collaborator, Trump, back in the White House. I say we, I'm not an American. I don't have a vote in that election. All right, thanks for watching. So please subscribe on Patreon, donate at PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Toodaloo.